going to turn to you, whether that's on Zoom, folks who are with us in the Zoom room, or folks that are joining us through Facebook. So please be sure that you're asking your questions there. We'll give it a couple more minutes here to settle in. All right, I think we are ready. So welcome again, everyone. My name is Betty Cruz. I'm the president and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh. I'm really happy to be here with you today and with Nisha Blackwell, the founder of Knots Land Bowties. She's the CEO and founder there. It's a local business based in the Pittsburgh area, Wilkinsburg to be exact, right? It's the headquarters of the Knots Land shop, but Knots Land's reach is global now, and we're really excited to hear about your journey, Nisha, about that move from Pittsburgh to reach across the world and how you've transformed the textile industry. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm proudly wearing a Knots Land bow tie. So loving it, loving all the work.
I love it.
All the work that you've been doing, the leadership that you've shown in your journey, but also in this moment. And we want to definitely talk through that in the time that we have with you today. And this conversation is part of the World Affairs Council's Building Back Better public program. And it's a series that we launched recently. And this particular segment of the series, as we look at how we're going to be building back better as a result of everything that we're navigating in the world, certainly inspired by needing to have a response to the global pandemic, but certainly there's so much going on in our communities as it relates to racial justice and injustice, and how we need to make change and need to accelerate that change together. And this particular conversation, as part of Building Back Better, is in our Pittsburgh Ingenuity focus. And Nisha has been leading the way as it relates to innovation, not just in the way that she built her business, but in the way that she's helped our community respond to this crisis. Again, for everyone joining, whether you're on Facebook or joining us through Zoom, please go ahead and put any questions that you have in the comments or the chat feature, and we're going to be getting through them throughout our conversation with Nisha. So again, welcome, Nisha. Thank you for being here. I wanted to start by grounding us with family. You had shared in a previous conversation that your grandmother was really important to you in many ways. Can you share a little bit more about that, about what she meant to you, both as you're thinking about your journey with Knots Land, you as a Black leader, a woman, all of the parts of your identity, and how she has helped you define how you show up in this world?
My goodness. I don't know how to unpack that in like short form, but I will attempt to. So my grandmother is like, she's the reason why I do everything. And I don't think I really realized it until, I was an adult and starting to build my own. But she was the type of person that would give you literally like the shirt off of her back. She constantly fought for her community. She lived in Homewood, and she was the president of the Homewood Tenant Council, and she would just like constantly advocate for people who may or may not felt like they had a voice. She advocated for getting a center on Hilltop in Homewood, which for the longest they were doing programming and after school programming out of different like big like houses, like because she also worked within the housing authority, so they would allow her to use like houses that no one would live in. And so I remember literally going to summer camp in a house, and this house was full of kids, and she served breakfast and lunch and rallied up the community to really benefit the greater good and the greater good around her. And then the center was built, And that same programming went from like this small home to like this center. And I personally was able to see it grow from like, wow, this 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 thing that she did just because like it was in her to do it, to being able to greater impact the whole community, and allow the community to see that investment, and they were worthy of change and investment up there. So again, it just, my grandma is the reason why I do everything. She's strong, she was a thrifter, and we fixed clothes together, and just all of the parts of me I see in her, and I see it again more now than I did growing up. I didn't really have that parallel um, understanding until like recently.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. She sounds like an extraordinary woman, and you are an extraordinary woman. So I see it. I see the thread.
Thank you,
And
Betty.
can you pull more into that as to how, you started to touch on your business? So your business is based in sustainable principles. Also, the community that you've built around you in terms of who you work with, your sewing team. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, so just to kind of pull back a little bit and go back to my grandma's story, in the Black community, it's really about village, right? It's all about village and taking care of people. And I don't think we really know much different, especially Black women. We're constantly looking around to see how we can support one another and pour into one another. And it's not just for the Black community, it's for the people around us. So if you're around us, you're automatically going to benefit from that village mindset. And so when I built Knots Land, it encompassed this because also I would go thrifting with my grandma my entire like Saturdays. I would hate to have to go to the Goodwill, go to the red, white, and blue, but that's what we did. And we an entire Saturdays, her, my mom, and I like picking out clothing and picking out things for the family, and not just the family, but like she would call as soon as we got home. She would like call up the neighbors and be like, hey, I have X here, can your kid use this? And hey, I have that. So thinking about how that translates into Land, I don't know anything different than to kind of do things in collaboration with, and not from a top down thing. So we're built on this idea that collaboration is key, and the team, for everything from the designing of the bow ties all the way to the making, to the designing of the flyers, is done in such a collaborative way. And I think it's because I don't know anything different, and I want to be fair, and I want to be a person of integrity. So I don't want anyone to feel really like they don't have ownership of Nosland. This is like, I'm just a vessel. I've created something, and I want to be able to share that with people, even if it doesn't mean that we participate in capitalism from that level. Because a lot of people look at us like, oh yeah, why should we give you investment? You're kind of not your numbers in terms of impact and returns and all of that. That's not there, because we pour it back into the community. Like we pay fair wages, we pay for training, like all of the things that I would want done for me are done through Godsland.
Wonderful. And with that, you speak of community, right? And we're talking a bit about culture as well. We started the conversations, we were chatting while we were getting set up here. The role of fashion in culture. And I was jokingly saying that I don't consider myself to be too fashion forward. It's my partner that has the Knots Land bow tie. But part of what I love about your brand is also how you push the envelope in terms of what defines, gender norms and identity, as well as when we think of, like I was sharing, wearing hoop earrings. That has a powerful statement for me as a Latina. But I remember seeing recently in the last few months a movement or a conversation around how it's an act of defiance. It's an act of power for women, particularly women of color, to wear hoop earrings, to push gender norms. Can you talk a bit more about the role of identity and culture in fashion?
Yeah, it's so interesting because Nasland is just one big identity mesh, because you know when I got into this, a lot of people expected me to be a man and a white man at that, because traditionally when people are getting, custom clothing and custom things, it generally intended to be like, whether you're from like Seville Row or something and you're doing that. So that alone put me in a unique position to bring my perspective to sustainable fashion and fashion in general. But also, people would ask us all the time and say like, hey, when are you going to make other products? What are you going to bring next? Are you going to do like long ties or this or that? And we've always responded with the same thing, like, our mission is really to make one product really, really well, but define it in so many different ways, and that includes having a really large LGBTQ following, really large women following. Like this past year in 2019, we had the most women buying bow ties, and just like we keep like those things in our branding, we keep those things. We in 2018, like for our holiday campaign, we really launched this idea that like it was called Style Is, and it was shot by and Jamie and styled by Imani Vintage. And literally, it brought together one person from every single spectrum, from transgender to non-binary to black men, black women, like literally around this idea that you should see yourself in a bow tie. Like, don't allow anyone to tell you that you can't wear something that you love, because a lot of times we would have, especially in the beginning, like, oh, are these for guys? And then guys will walk up to us and see like a woman behind the table and say like, oh, are these like women bows? And it's like, why is it the first thing? Like, if you like it, if you love it, buy it and wear it proudly.
Yeah. And how has that then connected to your growth? I know that while Homewood, born and bred, your storefront now is in Wilkinsburg, but again, your footprint is global. When did that moment shift for you? And can you tell us a little bit about how you went from being a local entrepreneur to a global one?
Oh my gosh, we've been so fortunate to have had national partners support our work. I think, it's been this idea of, oh my gosh, Google came and found a brand in Pittsburgh and decided to create a video for them. And then that, I mean, that alone provided exposure that we wouldn't have had access to in any way. And then we joined the Facebook Small Business Council, and that again kind of expanded our reach. So it's been these like pivotal moments. We had a pop-up during the holidays a couple years ago at Macy's, and we got a ton of customers from there. And it's just been this tranquil, we doing things at Ace Hotel, where people from out of town are here. So it really has been like this grassroots, because we don't have a huge marketing budget. We don't have access to like people who can give us large amounts of money to like advertise in these spaces. It's been this idea of like, this grassroots, slow moving. And once people see the product, then they basically fall in love and buy more for their friends and family.
Mhm. Excellent. And now, fast forward, your journey started in 2014. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2014 is when I started making hair bows. So it's like the soft part of the journey, but we became incorporated in 2015. So we officially will be celebrating 5 years in Knotsland this year.
Great. And as you've been growing, like many folks around the world, right, and in Pittsburgh, adapting to this moment in the journey and what that means, you had an important choice to make. Once we saw that the global pandemic, the impact it was going to have, and it was taking on here, just can't believe it. It's what, 12 weeks ago now. Um, can you tell us about what was going through your mind as you were looking at your growing business, um, and this need that was now facing all of us?
Yeah. My goodness. So this year was really supposed to be the year that Knotsland um, thought about expansion and what it looks like to, really have a presence in other cities. So with COVID, it was like, oh my gosh, like all of these plans, the strategic plan that we've laid out, we don't even know at what point we go where. Um, and then COVID happened, and COVID, that first week was probably the worst week in my business lifetime because we started getting phone calls from weddings that we had lined up, and larger orders that we had lined up that really were just like, hey, we have to put this on pause, and we can't, our wedding has been postponed. So, and people also, we did have people still purchase bow ties for their weddings and stuff, and the people who had it, and we couldn't be angry. I mean, we're in a global pandemic, but it was really really hard because it affected our cash flow immediately. That first week was really super duper depressing as a business owner, to have to call up our sewist community and say, hey, we don't have the projects that we had, and I don't know what this looks like. I'm so sorry. And everyone, again, was really, really understanding. But I take those things to heart because I don't want anyone to feel like I don't have their back, or we're unstable. And so it was tough. And so coming up on the end of, I believe it was like week 2, we started seeing Kumo and different people call for PPE, non-medical PPE, and I'm just like, oh, what's going on here? And it was a thing that I had planted in my head, but it wasn't until I started to see it keep growing and start to physically see the mass. I'm like, oh, okay, now I could see if we could sort of do something like that. But for me, it didn't necessarily start out as this idea that we're going to be sending masks to the medical community. It was more so like, how do I start to protect like my community and the people around me from having to feel unstable. A lot of people had to go to work. A lot of people had to work in grocery stores and had to work in convenience stores. I had a guy come and be like, can you please make my dad mask? He works at a gas station and he can't take off, and we had a lot of elderly people, so I immediately started making masks for the people around me who I knew still had to go to appointments and still had to do things in the world. This is before like the reports came out that it disproportionately affected people of color. This was like me being like, I can't even see them. If PPE is short in this realm, I don't even know when it would get to the individuals that I knew, like home health care and CNAs and different people that are just overlooked in the medical place because it was an emergency of higher staff and higher people up in the hospital. So I immediately kind of went in and started doing that. It was grassroots. People started contributing and donating. And that was when we were able to start re-engaging. Like it was this moment where it was like circular economy. Like this is why we do it. We were able to rehire some of our sewists who had lost projects to start to work on the masks for about a week or so. I did it by myself just so that we could build up inventory and build up money enough to start to say to re-engage, because I was like, I have to re-engage with folks that I just told that there were no projects. So I need to make sure that it is a meaningful opportunity. And it just kept flowing and flowing and flowing. And then we joined forces with mask makers, and that allowed us to expand our reach through organizations, and we brought on close to 300 volunteers who were sewing from home along with our home sewist community. And we started engaging with organizations to have better distribution practices and things like that, and it just like grew into this blossomed into this thing where everyone was pitching in to um, fulfill this need for the greater good. And it was an amazing thing to see, but probably the hardest thing to do because I still had feelings of like, I'm out here, I'm handing people, I have a mask on and I'm handing people paper bags with masks on. I'm like, what does it look like for me? Like, what if I get it and I don't have any health insurance or anything like that. So if I get it, then I'm just, so there were all of these things that were going through my head, but the desire to pitch in and really make a difference because we had the resources, we had fabric, we had people, was outweighed that fear.
Yeah, and just for folks that are tuning in, PPE is personal protective equipment. So as you've said, the masks. But just to clarify that, you've talked about your SOAS. Can you say more? And I know you hire a lot from different communities. Can you talk a little bit about their role and their the important part that they play as part of your broader family?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Nosland is a dual mission social enterprise in which we reclaim materials that may otherwise be wasted, and we put them back into a life cycle and a longer life cycle through breaking down the materials and make them into new bow ties. In order to do this, we rely heavily on a sewist community of women, and we have about 18 women within our network who we call on for projects and different things. And we generally have consistent like inventory that we have to fulfill and things like that. And it it's this idea that a there's so much going on in the world. Everyone can use additional income and additional flexible income. So when I started Nosland, I remember I was working as a host in a hotel. And I remember just being there for hours and hours and hours and wishing that I had more time to work on my business. And then I would have to come home and work on my business. And I'm like, there's something to being able to earn income at your own, at your own home in your own time. So that community of 18 women consists of a broad range of retirees who may be on a fixed income and looking for kind of more flexible income, like supplemental to, I mean, we know that fixed income is never enough. Um, Students, single moms, like we have a very, very huge passion for people who just like it's like, hey, a lot of people are like, oh, how are you recruiting? Like I've met people in Ubers, I've met people here, and it's all and been in the name of pitching in. And it's more than a lot of times I have to pitch the job opportunity to people, and it's like, hey, what am I going to be doing? And most people are like, no, I want to become a part of this because this is like for the greater good. This is a brand that's doing something. So I do want to say, like, while our sewists make a great amazing hourly rate, they're paid very fairly, they also are doing it more so because they're committed and they believe in the brand and they believe in the mission. A couple years ago I went to an organization. I was invited to an organization for the first time. I was super duper nervous, but it was a group of new Americans, and they invited me to speak. And I'm like, I don't really know what to say. I don't know how to say this, but we have opportunities for individuals to work from home. So if that's what anyone would like to do, and we have one lady who's been with us for 2 years. It was just like a beautiful thing to it's been a beautiful thing to witness like how our relationship has grown because we went from having to talk through a translator to she was in the shop yesterday all day working on projects, and now we're having like full-blown conversations. And it's something that I never thought that I'd be even in a situation, but business has brought me there in a meaningful way because it is about blurring those lines, and it's not always black and white. It's all of us it together, and being able to tap into other communities, especially black and brown communities, has been really something that I'm interested in and committed to. And after this test run of us learning and growing and seeing how after a while the color lines and all of that, the language barriers, all of that is removed when just a couple weeks ago I was like, hey, thank you so much I mean, I know things have been crazy with the mask stuff. Thank you so much for supporting Nasna through this. And she looked at me and she said, of course, you're my sister. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like these are the things that happen when we all work together, and it's just been amazing.
Beautiful. How has this, so it's accelerated a lot, right? In terms of new collaborations, a whole new world in terms of what you're actually creating. Has there been anything else, either through your network in Pittsburgh or outside of Pittsburgh, that you see having a lasting change in how you do what you do?
Oh my gosh. Um, just the, I mean, just the idea of being a Black woman in a sustainable space and in a socially conscious and aware space has been, I think that in itself is going to continue to transform and be transformational. yeah, it's such a wild ride. We'd never really know where it's going to take us. And I'm just excited to continue to be like a part of the movement. Hopefully I can encourage other people to do business in a way that is more circular. And so, yeah.
What about the whole focus on face masks right now? We do have a question from one of our audience members, participants. Michelle Price is asking about at the Center for Women's Entrepreneurship. They're looking at the prototype and design lab as to whether or not they should offer courses on mask making. Do you see that demand for mask making staying steady?
That's a really good question. And I think it's one that a lot of people who are making masks and in the space still ask themselves, like, we don't know. We don't know. But what I can say is the current need for masks and for the foreseeable future, definitely. I mean, because if you think about, everyone needs at least like what, 5 to 7 masks if you don't want to keep washing out the same one. So there's still a large enough need, and especially if people just want to make them for folks around them and don't want to launch a whole full-blown business. It could be a good and meaningful skill set to have, and God forbid we go back into um, another round of COVID, which has been predicted, then for sure it'd be as helpful as possible to have as many warriors mask making as possible.
What about so today, officially, Allegheny County is green. Um, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for your store in Wilkinsburg? This is also a question that we just received. Is your physical store currently open, and what can you tell us more about that space?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm probably going to go roundabout in this answer just a little bit, because previous to COVID, we've been exploring, like, what does it look like to really serve our customers? Is it, studio? Is it showroom? Is it this and that? And we had done this idea of like design your own bow tie event and all of that. So we had already been considering operating under like more of an appointment only basis. And it allows us to, like, because we have a studio showroom, so we do work there. And a lot of times people walk in and they're like, "Oh, hey," and they will have full blown 2 hour conversations. And so, how do we manage our community relationships and that? So we had been considering doing appointment only through the week and kind of doing open shopping hours on Saturday. We still are thinking that we'll do appointment only for a while we're in green, because it just, you never know. And I do want to make sure that, because there's three of us who like will work within the space. So I want to make sure first and foremost that their health and safety is a top priority, as well as my health and safety in the space. So I don't think we'll be opening in green for like public, and we'll keep an eye on it and we'll watch how things go. But I think we can continue to do the contactless. A lot of people have been ordering online and coming and doing contactless pickups and stuff like that. And I think, our customers and our community understands that.
So are you doing both bow ties and the face mask now, or had you halted completely at one point and you're back to?
Yeah, we halted complete. We were still getting bow tie orders here and there, but we had fully committed to face masks for at least like good 10 weeks within the pandemic. And that aspect of face masks was like, during like the height of pandemic, was all donation based, pay what you can, free. We're just trying to get as many masks into the hands of the people. But we've then shifted in these last 2 weeks to like figuring out how we can now sustain ourselves. Like, what does it look like to sell different upcycle face masks? And so that's what we've been doing now, is making batches of upcycled face masks lined with cotton. We're still working on the organic cotton because we generally don't buy anything new. But full transparency, the one thing that we do buy new is the organic cotton that goes on the inside of the mask. That way, I mean, or cotton or organic cotton that goes on the inside of the mask. That way, it's like it's just more safer, and it like there's no patterns, and you're able to really feel like you have a newer mask. And we're still using our upcycled washed materials for the externals of the masks, and we're making bow ties still. We've gotten a lot of bow tie orders here recently, and we just fulfilled a wedding, so we're starting to integrate the two products now, which is a whole nother thing. Most businesses go through, prototyping, planning, and design over a course of time, and we've had to do that in a rapid, uh, like maybe 5 weeks period, that we weren't like just rambling, but really trying to think of like what product development looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm wondering. It'll be interesting to see, and to the audience, actually, I'll say I have a couple more questions, but we're keeping an eye. If you have any other questions, please submit them to the comments part on Facebook, or if you're joining us by Zoom in the chat feature. So yeah, as you look at this, all that you're learning on the fly, all that you've already done, and your reach in the last 6 years, but also how that's been accelerated now. When you think, can you even think ahead to like 5 years from now where you want to be, and what that looks like from what it used to look like, what it means now?
That's thank you for asking that. And again, it's something, as an entrepreneur, I have to think of like so many different like angles, right, at all times. And so that is one of the things that we've thought about. The mission behind Noslin has always been to grow. When we think about that restructuring and what this year was meant for, has been to grow like many communities, as we've cultivated here in Pittsburgh, in different cities and different spaces, and different, targeting communities that can utilize and use a small batch, community centric, circular, sort of framework that we've built, and grow in that sort of way. And uh, I don't know what that looks like from a product standpoint. I still strongly believe that we can grow in different communities around the world, but it may just be different products. It may just be, maybe we'll be making face masks in one place and bow ties in another place, or, it originally it was all around bow ties, like, and so now we're thinking about what it looks like to develop that plan and that model in a flexible manner that can pivot and be agile enough, as we were in our COVID response, to be able to make different products.
Great. So I want to come back to where we started, and being grounded in family and talking about culture and community. I mean, that message of it takes a village, and how you describe that as being central to your identity as a Black woman, and as central to the Black community, and the role that your grandmother had. And as we look around at what we're facing, right? And not what just we're facing today, what has been maybe not faced by most, but obviously coming to a head now, in terms of the need for racial justice, the need for everyone to say and act in a way that uplifts the reality that Black lives matter. What what can you share in terms of this moment, how you're processing? Um, what would you like to share with folks that are listening in?
Yeah, Betty, I honestly, it's devastating. It's been, oh my gosh, like the physical exhaustion of having to revisit trauma that has always been there. I mean, I was still living during Rodney King and Jordan Miles and Antoine Rose, like all of these things, that it's been this constant like revisiting of that trauma that America has inflicted on Black people. And this ripping of the wound, if you will, and this public lynching essentially kind of takes the band-aid off of like the systems. It's so deeply rooted in so many structures and so many systems that we are all a part of. And so for me, it's been a bit overwhelming to think of like my place and my role in those systems and how I can even, I mean, we all can afford to do better, and we all can do the research and learn and figure out how we are in our daily lives not participating in that. So, my goodness, just thinking about how more than ever, Black people need the support of other immigrants and people of color in this country, because just as quick as the country turns on Black people, the country turns is because it's so built off of this idea. It's built by old white men. And so it'll always skew to that until we all stand together. So I think the moment in the country has ripped off the band-aid for everyone, and it has given us there's hope in my heart that it has given us a chance to rebuild and restructure and rebuild all of these systems, from justice to education to entrepreneurship to business to, I mean, literally every single system that you can look around and think of. I mean, look at how COVID impacted African Americans at disproportionate rates, from death to contracting it. And it is because we are generally essential workers. We have to be out there. A lot of us don't have the luxury, if you will, or the option to stay at home and work from home. And we also don't have the luxury of not working. So just thinking about like those, so every single system has to be re-examined and reevaluated. So I think this is a moment when people of the world can all start to get together and support, because supporting Black America is supporting everybody, literally.
Absolutely. And we even see it spurring, right, global solidarity. We've seen movements in other countries saying to the US that they stand with Black Americans, and also how this is a rallying cry for other countries where there's Black oppression happening as well. Kayla from Casa Brazil, one of my favorite local restaurants, was just sharing recently. They received an outpour of support from our community, which is terrific. But she was also sharing there was a Black Brazilian in
I saw
Brazil
that.
by the government recently. And we know in Colombia, there have also been protesters holding up signs in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and saying that they matter in their countries too. And so what are the lessons of ripples? Again, this isn't insular, although it is very much an American problem, and one that hopefully will finally solve. Um,
Mhm.
Action, right? I'm glad to hear more people saying the words, and now it's about that transfer to action, to the pain that you're feeling and the re-traumatization that comes with every new story or uprising. We have a question from Phyllis on Facebook asking about how you're carving out downtime. So this reality around mental health. Um, how are you taking care of yourself?
Thank you for asking that, Phyllis. It's a lot of my friends have been really great at reminding me of that. I am unfortunately stuck in a really unique position where I am a business owner and also a Black American dealing with this. So to that, it's been this like tough balance of making sure that my business makes it out of here, but also sort of processing at the same time and on the fly. So I really haven't had much downtime, and I really need to get better with that. I say it every day, but I do need to get better with taking that time. And because I've been working literally 6 days a week since the start of I mean before COVID, but ever since, and just haven't really had much time because, thinking about business and applications and funding and trying to, make sure that we are still stable on the other side of this. And most importantly, now as a Black owned business, and someone who's also supporting other individuals within the business, that it does work. So yeah.
What about again, thinking ahead, how do you think, well, we talk about building back better, right? That's the language that we're using now. We borrowed that from the World Bank, that it came out in a report a few years back when we're talking about post-disaster recovery. How do you build back better? This is a disaster in terms of a public health disaster, economic disaster, educational disaster. And that's just talking about COVID. When you layer in what has now the uprising around racial injustice, then that is another disaster unto itself. And while there's added pain that both of these are happening at the same time, my hope is that there's also added opportunity that accelerates real action, and that we do learn and change faster and
Yep.
once and for all. With that in mind, and this whole kind of language around reimagining a better future, a better world, what are some things that come to mind to you that you'd like to see um, us focus on as a community, as a city, as a world, to really build back better?
Yeah. So um, for me, immediately that comes to mind around building back better is this idea that, we're all in the reactive phase. We're all upset and emotional right now, but, what if tomorrow everything goes back to normal and everyone has to go back to work, and kids go back to school? What does it look like to embed action into this quote normal that we all go back to? Which, I'm not saying that everything's going to go back to normal, because I think if there's a new normal, but moving past the reactive and being aware and cognizant of the subtle things. I mean, so many people participate in subtle, like perpetuating like this, like subtle racism, and this non-intended, and this, so my hope is that people are taking what little downtown we have left, and also moments during the new normal, to educate themselves on being better neighbors and better advocates, better listeners. Because if for once it feels like America is listening to Black America, for once it feels like the world is listening to Black America, but are you really listening? Are you really taking into consideration the things beyond this like heightened moment of emotion, and really turning that into action?
Yeah. Like Angela Davis said, and Ibram Kendi has popularized more recently with his book, right? It's not enough to not be racist. You have to be anti-racist, and that takes work. That's not a declaration, a mountaintop. It takes work.
A
Um,
lifetime of work, a lifetime of work, and unpacking and unlearning. Like, one of the hardest things to do is to unlearn something, right? So just think of all of the ways that you've learned to navigate a world in which privilege exists, and in which inequality exists. So unpacking and unlearning that is a lifelong uh, process that probably won't be necessarily easy, but knowing that it'll be better, you'll make it better for other people, and you'll make it better for the people, for our elders who also fought this same fight. You'll make it better for the children who may not have to fight the same fight, because we are actually addressing it this time. Um, so yeah.
yeah. Um, That's really powerful, and I think we'll leave it there and take those lessons that you've shared, and particularly I think this lesson from the village, because it's going to take a village to,
Hmm.
just as everything else that you've shared. So what does that anti-racist village look like, particularly for the folks that are tuning in, for whom this is new language and they don't know where to start. So how they need to find their village, build that kitchen table, and start to do the work, and support Black businesses and support leaders from the community. And why don't you close us out by letting us know how folks can connect with you? Are there volunteer opportunities right now? Where should they turn to?
Yeah, so I did put my email in the chat box here. You can connect. We always need help. Again, we are very grassroots. We're very circular driven. So it takes a lot of work to sort, to process, to track our fabric, cut down our fabric, like all of those things we always need help with. Um, and categorizing fabric because we like to keep things oops, because we like to keep things like nice and sorted, and we like to keep the story of the fabric with it also. So there's a lot of things that can be done on a volunteer level. I'm
Folks can,
actually going to retype it.
in case you chat, for anyone tuning in on Facebook, where should they go on your website? Is there a place on
So
your
there's a general contact us and an inquiry sheet. So you could just go straight through there. My email is nisha@knotsland.com. But also you can follow our Instagram. We've been very active on there, which is just @Knotsland. You can like our Facebook page, which is Knotsland.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I forgot to ask you, can you share what's on your t-shirt?
Oh yeah. So this, I can't tell. I should have put the mirror function on. It's It
This is
says this expensive shirt was made by, this expensive t-shirt was made by a Black designer. And it's a Black owned business called Mess in a Bottle. They are online. They've actually been crazy busy, but I love their clothing. And if you have a Black friend or someone who you can gift it to, please consider them because they just have amazing messages. And it comes in a bottle, and it comes in like a water bottle, which is pretty cool.
excellent. Thank you so much, Nisha. Thank you for the work that you're leading. Thank you for making Pittsburgh the community a better and brighter community, and for your ingenuity and the impact it's having around the world. We're really lucky to have you here and to hear from you today. So thank you for your time. For folks who want to tune into future programs like this, please check us out at worldpittsburgh.org/programs, and take care, everyone. Be kind to
Betty, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the work that you put in, and just making this space and creating space for everyone to come together. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Bye,
And all
everyone.
the ways that you've supported Knotsland over the years.
Yeah, love it. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.